Hello and welcome to another Beast PC video. This video will be an appreciation video for hardware that I enjoy and recommend, of course with Beast PC benchmarks and overclocking as well. For anybody out there searching for a budget PC or a used Dell Optiplex for example, you might find Intel's 4th generation i5s to be a pretty good choice. And we've recommended them in previous videos. So in this video, we'll examine one of the cheapest and most available offerings, the i5 4460. This CPU features 4 cores and 4 threads like every other 4th gen i5, except for certain T SKUs. Since this is one of the lower end ones in the main 4400 series versus the 4500 and 4600s, it has a lower clock speed. This particular CPU has a base clock of 3.2 GHz with turbo up to 3.4. Like, okay, thanks Intel for 0.2 GHz, and all-core turbo is non-existent, it goes back down to 3.2. It's also a locked CPU, meaning you can adjust the multiplier and RAM frequency maxes out at 1600 MHz. It also features HD graphics 4600 if you're interested in that, and all of this is wrapped up in a package of about 84 watts, which seems rather high for a locked CPU. However, we did find that under load, motherboard reported power reading wasn't very high, and this thing can undervolt pretty easily since its clock speed is so low. I've used this CPU as my daily system for the past couple of weeks, mainly to play lighter games like GTA 5 and casual internet browsing. I had it paired with the RX 560 you've seen in a previous video, and I've kept that overclocked as well. Overall, the system was very adequate for the light gaming I did. But we're here today for a quantitative assessment of this CPU, so for the benchmarks I've added 16 GB of dual channel RAM at 1600 MHz CL9, I've cooled the CPU with a pretty bare bones tower cooler, and I put all games on SSD storage. The GPU is overclocked as it is in previous videos to 1330 on the core and 2275 on the memory. We're all ready, so let's get started. Starting with GTA 5 at 1080p high, this combo worked together for an excellent 78 FPS average, and the CPU was surprisingly not bottlenecking the graphics card. For comparison, an overclocked 9600K with the same GPU did 73 FPS average, which is lower somehow, meaning we probably messed up a graphics setting here or there. Either way, the CPU still performed excellently despite its low clock speed. The CSGO benchmark ran at 1080p high at 149 FPS average, which is only slightly lower than the 9600K, which in comparison did 156 FPS. The last game we tested in the shorter benchmark list was Fortnite at 1080p high, which ran at 57 FPS average. For comparison, the same GPU on the 9600K did slightly better at 62 FPS average. And that concludes all the games that'll tax the CPU more than the GPU. In this video, I've actually undervolted the CPU cores by 100 mV and the ring by 50 mV for less power consumption. Given how efficient it becomes, you would be perfectly fine using, for example, the Intel stock cooler or even one of those passive coolers. While these aren't really the best CPU performance tests, I'm very happy with the performance of the system as a whole. For anybody on a budget, it's not a bad template to start with, to make a nice reliable budget PC with a decent upgrade path. You could definitely swap the CPU for something like a 4670K and get more performance by overclocking, and since this is Haswell, using a Z board isn't necessary since all the motherboard vendors unlocked multiplier overclocking on pretty much all the boards. These 1150 motherboards I found are quite reliable and their BIOSes are written pretty well, although of course lower end boards may lack certain features. And of course, they represent the pinnacle of the mainstream DDR3 era. So everything in this system is quite sensible and easily available for very standard prices. The i5 costs about $40 to $50, a motherboard should be under $65, and the GPU is easily available under $70. Also, everything in the system is easily swappable. There's decent enough upgrade path on this particular socket, and the GPU has a lot of room for improvement. The current CPU and GPU are also a great pairing if you have a weaker or OEM power supply, since the entire system only draws about 200 watts. Overall, this is a very practical budget PC, a bare-bones, non-obtrusive, reliable machine. If your objective is to play games without much tweaking and you're on a budget, I'd be hard-pressed to find a better combo than a quad-core 4th Gen i5 and a cheap, efficient GPU. That's all for this video, and thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like and do please consider subscribing. See you next time.